Hey guys, Youngblood with you, and today what I wanted to do is a video talking about the two SciTech kind of slash Mad Catz products that I've been using, and that's going to be the x52 Pro and the x55 Rhino. Now, both of these are SciTech HOTAS, or hands-on throttle and stick controllers, and are two of the most popular ones out at the moment. Now, before I get started, yes, there are some known issues with the quality control, the durability, but right now they are two of the best-selling joystick HOTAS setups out there for under $200. Now, I'm going to try and keep saying x52 Pro, but if I end up saying x52, just know that I'm talking about the Pro version, because I haven't used the cheaper non-Pro version. Now, I started with the x52 Pro about 18 months ago after a ton of research, and I got it primarily to use in Star Citizen. And I was extremely happy with it for the most part, and it was just incredibly intuitive to learn. Now, the reason I ended up getting the x55 was because my x52 Pro actually had the spring inside the joystick that ends up giving you resistance on twist motions. That broke on me, so it was just floppy. And what that really meant was I couldn't get any control to the left or right. Now, luckily, all SciTech and Mad Catz products come with a 2-year guarantee, so I was able to send it back for warranty repairs. Now, I wasn't super keen on the idea of waiting several weeks with, no flight sims to play. So prior to shipping the Pro back, I actually ordered an x55. So there you have it, the story of my two purchases. But I want to go ahead and compare them for you in case any of you guys are on the fence or just we're not sure what you want to end up purchasing. So I'm going to try and break these down into sections, to try and make this a little easier to follow. So we're going to talk through price, ergonomics, and button placement, build quality and feel, and then just kind of hit on some miscellaneous stuff and give you my overall recommendation. So first off, talking about price, at the point of making this video right now, you can get the x52 on Amazon for $154 and the x55 on Amazon for $179. So right now, that's a $25 difference, and that's not really a whole lot. And those prices tend to kind of stay in that ballpark. However, the x52 Pro does tend to fluctuate, and when I got my first one, it was only $138, which was a good day for me. Now, the x55 being newer, and what they claim to be a higher quality, tends to kind of stay just under that $200 price tag. So I haven't seen a lot of fluctuation there personally, but I also don't look at it every day. Now, when we start talking about ergonomics, I think this is where one of the controllers really is just far superior, and that's the x52 Pro. The shape of the throttle on the x52 Pro just feels right. It's flatter, it's more slender, it's more comfortable, and it's got a really nice groove where the thumb sits and just kind of lets you know where you're always at on your throttle. Now, yes, there's probably going to be a lot of easy puns to make throughout this video and some probably innuendo, so let's go ahead and just say giggity once to go ahead and get it out of the way and we can move on. Now, when we compare that natural feel to the x55, it has a much bulkier throttle handle. And it's worth noting that the throttle on the x55 has two separate throttles. So for those of you that are interested in hardcore flight sims, there may be some value there for you. Now, since I know most of you are here, most of you that are here typically play Star Citizen and Elite Dangerous, this feature just doesn't really prove to be all that useful. Now, there's even times when I move the throttle on the x55 that I can feel the two throttles almost bending together to meet in the middle. Now, I think that's probably partially a function of me being kind of aggressive with my controllers, but I thought it was noteworthy to bring up. Now, onto the joysticks, the x52 Pro comes with a handguard that can be moved up and down. Now, it's not really guarding you from anything. However, it does give you the option to customize your comfort level some depending on the size of your hand. The x55 doesn't give you that, as an option, and really opts for more of a one-size-fits-all joystick. It's not massive, it's not small, but it is on the large side, and players with smaller hands may have a hard time with it. Outside of ergonomics, I think button placement is the other one where I really feel like the x52 Pro is far superior to the x55. Now, there's no doubt that when it comes to just sheer number of buttons, the x55 trumps the x52, big time. But the location of the buttons is where I really kind of start having complaints. So if we head back over to the throttles to compare them, the x52 Pro has a hat switch where your index finger just naturally lands. And this is hands down my favorite feature of this controller. It's a perfect switch to use for strafing. It's natural, it's comfortable, it's effective, and hell, it's borderline necessary in these space sims like we're playing. Now, other than that, it has a boost button and a few others that I like to use for reverse flight, but overall, it's simple and it's kind of just elegant in its purpose. It's effective. Now, comparing that to the cumbersome beast that is the x55 Rhino, the x55 has more buttons, but the placement isn't for me. Now, on the left throttle, it has an up and down hat switch, and on the right, there seems to be like two inward action buttons. Now, I found that I would use those for choosing targets and other various tasks. The hat switches on the x55 that you could use for strafing are really kind of found by your thumb. And there's two of them, and they're small, and they're close. Now, I don't know about you, but I find it much more comfortable and controllable to use my index finger on the x52 as compared to the thumb on the x55. The dexterity of my index finger, the the placement of the button, it just feels better with my index finger. And the placements of the buttons on the x55 by the thumb are so close that it's easy to accidentally bump the other. Now, I like to say that I would have gotten used to it and probably would have, but space flights get hectic and mistakes could be very easily made. And I think the other thing that was kind of easier was getting real true movement using the index finger on the x52 Pro, especially just knowing that if you're pushing down, you're going down. Whereas the little thumb hat switches on the x55 made it a little bit less controllable. Something like that really makes things like landing a lot easier, especially when you talk about Elite Dangerous with the x52 Pro. Now, the joystick ends up following a similar pattern between these two. The x55 has more buttons, but that doesn't mean they're better buttons. On the x52 Pro, you've got a trigger, a pinky trigger, and two hat-like switches, a flat button, and 3 round buttons. And in both games that I've mentioned above, it feels like the perfect layout for firing multiple weapon groups, having a flare setup, targeting, and even a push-to-talk button for mumble or TeamSpeak. Also, again, based on the handguard or that rest that I mentioned, it's easier to hit all the buttons because the controller just fits your hand. The x55 has a primary trigger, a secondary pinky trigger, a button by the pinky, a thumb button, 3 hat switches, a missile-type button, and another button on the right side. Now, when I look at the x55, it looks like it would give me everything that I could possibly need, and for some, it might, but here's my beef. The buttons on the x52 are easy to hit without any obstructions. On the x55, the upper hat switch is just damn near useless, and at least to me, because the hat below that gets in the way, and you end up hitting buttons, in other ways. And for my size of hands, I would have to kind of release the bottom of the stick a little bit to kind of hit the top of the stick, and that can mean less fine movements and could mean death in heated battles. So the secondary trigger at the bottom is a nice perk, but the pinky button on the x55 is hit or miss, and it doesn't always register as a constant press. At least it didn't for me, which I was trying to use for my push-to-talk button, so it kept getting cut out and my voice comms would drop. Now, I think one redeeming factor for the x55 when talking about buttons is the sheer number of them. The throttle base is just covered with switches and knobs, and most of them are two-way. And I think if you're someone who plans to not have a keyboard on your desk, or maybe just one of those little one-handed deals, then having the extra buttons is a huge perk for you. I know a lot of people who are constrained by space, so that may end up being a good fit for that type of person. For me, it just wasn't quite right. I play with a joystick on the right side of my keyboard and a throttle on the left-hand side. My keyboard sits between them, so I have all the buttons I need on my keyboard if they're not on my controllers. Now, talking about build quality, this goes to the x55. It's heavier, it feels significantly sturdier. It also comes with 4 springs to swap out to your liking, all of them having varying degree of stiffness. Now, I like a stiff stick. All right, I'll give you a giggity there. So, while the x55 was almost as strong as I wanted it to be, just stock with the firmest spring, I had to take a piece of foam off of the top of a CD spindle and stick it up into the slot where the spring compresses on the x52 Pro in order to get the level of feedback that I wanted. Now, with that being said, it was damn near perfect. So as far as the throttles are concerned, the x55 has a ton of resistance in first. It almost feels like you're kind of forcing your ship to speed up, which is kind of cool. But that novelty kind of wore off pretty quick, and I got to a point where I just wish it was looser and faster. I wanted it to feel like the x52 does, where you can just slam it forward. You're not fighting it forward. Now, with the x52 Pro, it does have a throttle detent, which gives you resistance when you hit the 25 and 75% throttle. Basically, that's letting you know, but without looking, where you're currently at. I personally hated this. It's something you can actually remove. However, I do believe that voids the warranty, but it's just kind of a minor annoyance if you do want to keep it. Now, any way you cut it, though, the x55 is a higher quality product, as it just feels like it could take a pounding, where the x52 feels a little bit weaker. One other thing to keep in mind is that the x55 is a behemoth. It's probably 30% larger on the base of both the throttle and the stick, so it takes up a lot of desk space. The bottom of the x52 relies on suction cups, or it has spots where you could technically screw it down onto your desk. whereas the X55 is just heavy and ends up having non-slip pads. Now, in general, I prefer the suction cups because I can be a little bit rougher with it, but I did like that I could just toss the X55 on my mouse pad and it wouldn't really move. Now, a hard pitch up or down and it would rock a little bit, but not a whole lot. Overall, I really like both sticks, but I just love the X52 Pro. It seems like a version of the original X55 that just got tweaking to button placement, layout, and quality. And I wouldn't be surprised if we end up seeing a Pro version of the X55 at some point. But where it is now, I just think the X52 Pro makes more sense. It's more intuitive, and it has the kind of those kinks worked out. So for me, I would recommend the X52 Pro to anyone. But the X55 only really gets a recommendation to those who really like the extra buttons or the bigger size. Now, each of them have had their share of issues through their lifespan, especially the X55 lately since it's relatively new, though the quality control seems to be improving drastically the more they're putting into production. Both are really good, but if I'm suggesting one and only one, I would hands down say go with the X52 Pro. Now, before everybody starts putting it in the comments, yes, there are more expensive joysticks out there. You can get, $400, $600 setups, but we're talking about this under $200 price point. And there's also ones that come in significantly cheaper that are still good sticks. But I think a lot of people are on the fence about these two, and I really wanted to make it out. So, there you have it. That's my breakdown of the two. If you have questions, let me know. Leave comments below. Otherwise, stay tuned for a whole lot more content, and I'll catch you guys later. Take care.